Senate Bill 63, I'll roll it into Senate Bill 360. Senator McClellan is carrying the administration's bill, so I'm happy to do that.
63 and 760?
360.
360.
Yeah.
All right, Senator Howell moves and Senator Lucas seconds to roll these together, 63 and 360. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Those are rolled together with the two of you as chief co-patrons. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move now to reporting lost or stolen firearms. Did you want to?
I'm sorry. Oh, so we're going to come back to that. Why don't we do it now?
Okay, you want to do it now? Sure.
Yeah. Since you're both here.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning.
So Senate Bill 360 is the bill that would allow local governments to prohibit the possession or carrying of firearms, ammunition, and component parts in public spaces during a permitted event or an event that should be permitted under the local ordinances. This is a bill that came out of the after action review that after the Charlottesville events of April 12th, resulting from Executive Order 68, the Governor's Task Force on Public Safety Preparedness in Response to Civil Unrest. What we are seeing, and Secretary Moran is here and can go into more details on what they saw, but let me tell you what I saw personally in the city of Richmond, which a month after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, there was a smaller rally on Monument Avenue. I live literally around the corner from the statue of Robert E. Lee. As you know, Robert E. Lee is state property. And so on the circle where Robert E. Lee, the statue itself, sits, the Commonwealth can prohibit the carrying of firearms during permitted events or can prohibit any events at all. And that's what happened that day. As you recall, there was a suspension of any permitted events pending a review of the guidelines surrounding such permits. But when the Confederate States of America II came to Richmond, they did their demonstrations around the General Lee statue. That's city property. And so if you have a rally or a demonstration on Monument Avenue, which is in the middle of a residential street, a highly trafficked residential street with houses literally around the corner, a daycare, my daughter's daycare, a church, my house literally around the corner. You can have weapons banned in one place, but not across the street. What we are seeing is the events of Charlottesville show a new brand of protest where firearms are prevalent, where firearms can and in some cases were used. One thing Secretary Moran told me that I had not realized, firearms were discharged in Charlottesville. We are lucky no one was hit. I can speak from personal experience that on the day of the rally in Richmond, I had to keep my children away from the windows because I didn't know if Richmond was going to turn into Charlottesville. That is not a free exercise of speech. That borders on terrorism. And so I think if we are going to allow the Commonwealth to ban weapons for permitted events, localities should have that same right, particularly when those events are in the same place. And with that, I'd like to have Secretary Moran come up and speak.
Okay, Secretary Moran, come on up and speak to it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and I think Senator McClellan has articulated the purposes of this bill very, very well. This is limited to permitted events. We want to encourage localities to adopt rigorous permitted conditions to regulate the marches and demonstrations, similar to what we saw in Charlottesville and Richmond. This bill would give permissive authority to localities to ban firearms at permitted events. So it is limited in nature. Now, why is that necessary? What we saw in Charlottesville is depicted on this photograph. Again, Asif Bhavnagri is kind enough to hold it up. We saw two instances there. Well, at least two instances are depicted on here, one of which is open carry of military-style assault weapons, which chilled individuals' First Amendment rights. There were numerous people there in Charlottesville to protest against the hate speech that was taking place at Emancipation Park. Many people saw these firearms and left the site because these are very intimidating weapons. Second and above, we see an individual actually firing a handgun. He had been carrying that concealed during the demonstration. And then, again, he's at Emancipation Park and actually discharged the firearm in the direction of another individual. We are extremely fortunate that that did not escalate beyond that firearm. I mean, he is being prosecuted for that offense.
Senator Stanley.
Secretary Moran, let me just ask you this, though. In my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's even depicted in the upper photo, that was the incident involving where someone was using an aerosol can and a lighter as a flamethrower about at the same time. Isn't that right?
That is correct. In fact, the
Okay.
flamethrower, but that was directed at,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So, and Mr. Chairman, that would be considered a dangerous weapon as well, wouldn't it?
He is being prosecuted as well.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I
should-
just wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Now, I want to say in terms of the task force, we spent a lot of time on the issues around Charlottesville and its aftermath. I want to thank Senator Bryce Reeves. He was on the task force, as well as the former chair of the Militia and Police Public Safety Committee, Scott Lingenfelter. And we came up with a number of recommendations. This is one, so that we can provide localities ability to regulate these events that can very much, as we saw in Charlottesville, turn violent. I think this would give them the tools to do just that. And again, it's limited to permitted events. And I know Mr. Benjamin has taken a look at the language, and he is prepared to offer some language that I think Senator McClellan will adopt, and we are amenable to that language. I think it tightens it up, and would be amenable to that.
All right.
And I'm here to answer any questions you might have, and I think Senator McClellan again articulated the difference. Robert E. Lee Monument in Richmond, it was state property. We were able to ban firearms, yet no locality in the Commonwealth of Virginia is able to do the same, and they should be able to do the same.
All right.
Can I just add one thing real quick?
Yes, Senator McClellan.
Chief Durham from the city of Richmond wanted to be here to talk a little bit more about what happened in the city. He could not be here, but his deputy, Chief Drew, is here if you have any questions for him. I would make one comment in response to Senator Stanley's question. Here in the city, Chief Durham did ban all weapons except firearms. So for the permitted event here in Richmond, anybody coming with an aerosol can would have had that taken away when they went through the checkpoint.
Okay, so before we hear speakers in support of or in opposition of the bill, my understanding is that somebody may wish to propose an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, one of the problems with the current draft is that it permits a locality to adopt ordinances that prohibit possession of firearms during a permitted event without requiring that be within any certain distance or near the event. So, for example, if there were an event on Monument Avenue, the city of Richmond could pass an ordinance prohibiting possession of a firearm in Southside, and that's clearly not what the patron or the administration intends. So, to try to tighten this up, on line 29, after the word thereof, you would strike the remaining language in that sentence and insert this language: on public property within a certain number of feet. I think the administration would suggest within 1,000 feet. That's used throughout the code. So again, it's on public property within 1,000 feet of a public assembly, demonstration, march, parade, protest, rally, or other similar event for which the locality has issued a permit or for which a permit is required by the ordinances of that locality. That's the first suggested amendment. The second amendment would borrow from Senate Bill 63, which provides for exceptions. And my understanding from the administration is that those exceptions would be as follows, picking up on line 38 from Senate Bill 63. Such an ordinance shall not apply to any law enforcement officer as defined in section 9.1-101, armed security officer as defined in 9.1-138, member of the armed forces of the United States, comma, member of the armed forces, reserves, or member of the National Guard acting in the performance of his lawful duties, period.
Not the remainder of that language, or to any person not having a valid concealed handgun permit?
That is in Senate Bill 63, Mr. Chairman, but I did not understand the administration to be proposing that a concealed weapon permit holder be exempted.
Why not?
That's the administration, not me.
Well, it wasn't directed to you.
Well, we'd prefer not to have, regardless whether or not it's lawful or not, to have firearms at a demonstration. I think what we saw in Charlottesville you can exercise your First Amendment rights without carrying a firearm.
Well, let me ask counsel that First Amendment within 1,000 feet of a demonstration, march, parade, protest, rally, or other similar events. Is that basically the language that you?
It is.
So how do you determine where the 1,000 feet begins, ends? How about a parade? When does it stop being in a particular place? How do you determine the 1,000 feet? And how do you prevent it from affecting innocent bystanders, folks who, that concealed carry permit holder who just happens to be on the mall in Charlottesville or someplace else?
Mr. Chairman.
Let me ask Steve.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, you raise good logistical questions. If a parade is down Monument Avenue, then I think it will be fairly easy to determine 1,000 feet within the borders of that street or that sidewalk. If it's in a park.
While the parade is, it's a moving thing.
It is, but it's also permitted. And so the scope of that parade, the parameters and boundaries of that parade for which the permit permits it, that's going to be defined by the permit.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Hang on a second, Steve.
We have, the same questions arise in other situations. For example, we have prohibited the possession of controlled substances within 1,000 feet of a school. A school obviously isn't a moving thing, but throughout the code, the best we have been able to do so far is to use a proximity, a measure.
I know where a school is, and I know I see the sign for the school. I see the entrance to the school. I know where its boundaries are. It's not going to move. It's not going to pop up tomorrow or next weekend or 2 weeks from now. But I may have no idea that there's a rally or demonstration. If I'm driving into a school property, I know I can't take a gun onto the school property, but I may not know I can't take that even a permitted event is taking place. And frankly, some of these permitted events are so darn small, you might walk into the middle of it and not know it is even taking place there.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the answer to the very valid question you raise is to require that any such ordinance have an intent or a knowing element to it. So you would permit a locality to pass an ordinance that prohibits the knowing possession, not the knowing possession, but the possession.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I got it.
Mr. Chair.
Senator
I
Peterson, Senator
Let me just
McDougal.
sometimes you have to make the obvious point. This is simply allowing an ordinance, okay? So trying to micromanage 500 feet or 375 feet is a little bit stupid, okay? Let the localities come up with situation-specific circumstances. We all know what's going on here, okay? The most simple statute in history was thou shalt not kill, okay? That was 4 words. Now, if some of us have been here, it may have been 1,000 words. But the bottom line is, let's just get to the point, and the ordinance can take care of these details.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman, I
Chairman?
do have a solution
Mr.
to your
Chairman?
problem.
Senator McDougal.
But the devil is in the details, Mr. Chairman, and if you were to pass this and there's a protest at the Richmond City Council building or Richmond City Hall, and people are on Capitol Square or in their General Assembly building, they would be in violation of the statute at any time they were in the building, that there was a prevented event at that location. So I do think it has a wider impact than what the senator indicates that it might have, and there can be some significant unintended consequences.
Senator McClellan.
Thank you. I do have a suggestion that I think will resolve this issue. As a practical matter, when you have these permitted events, the police department does set a perimeter around the permit zone. That's exactly what they did here in Richmond. That's exactly what happened with the inauguration this past weekend. So what you could do is, rather than just saying within 1,000 feet outright, saying within a designated perimeter established by the police department within, you know, however many feet you want. And that way everybody is clear when you see the Jersey barrier or when you see the green bike racks, and that's where that's the designated area where you go through the checkpoint and then you can't take your
So
gun.
you're talking about within the perimeter?
Yes.
Okay. Do they all have perimeters?
I think if you put that in the statute, that it's within the designated perimeter zone, my guess is that they will, or it won't apply.
Okay. All right.
On both sides.
I think it's unworkable. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I
let's-
just want to state the obvious. I understand Senator McClellan's thought process on that, but I think that makes it worse because there's nothing that prevents the ordinance from saying that the entire jurisdiction is the area that the permitted event is allowed to occur in. I mean, it could be limited, but it could be not limited, and we don't have any idea what that would be.
All right, let's cogitate over that for a minute. Let's hear speakers in support of this bill first. Go. And I think Richmond Police, I want to make sure you're heard too. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Senators. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Kathy Galvin. I'm a resident of Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm also a Charlottesville City Councilor. I am in support of the bill before you by Senators McClellan and Favola, and we will be also in support of a bill coming before you later on by Senator Deeds. Again, I am grateful to be here. It is an honor to be here, but it also is a duty and a necessity on my part to be here because I am a city councilor and I've taken an oath of office to protect my constituents, to protect the people of Charlottesville. I'm also there to protect and make sure that they have their Bill of Rights ensured. To further explain, let me please share with you briefly a glimpse of the morning of August 12th, 2017 in Charlottesville. That morning the air was tense. It was frightening. The streets of Charlottesville are small, narrow. The parks of Charlottesville are small. It's a very populated city. It was only a matter of time before a match would be struck that would have lit the tension of that air. That is what this bill speaks to. If there had at one point been a gunshot, fortunately no one was hurt. But if it had been a semi-automatic, the damage would have been that much greater. The show of force instills fear and negates our right to free speech and our right to free assembly. One right in our Bill of Rights, the right to bear arms, cannot be so misconstrued that it effectively cancels out to
Ms.
others
Galvin, I want to be
the right to free
respectful,
speech.
but your other speakers have a minute
Okay,
left.
thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. We really, let me stop. Ms. Galvin, I'm not using the other speaker's time, but I do want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy, and my cutting you off, I really wasn't trying to be disrespectful, so I do
I
appreciate
did have
it.
the understanding that I was taking the time from other people. That's
You
why
were.
I,
That's all right.
okay,
Thank you.
I was completing my remarks. And
That's
the last thing
okay.
I'll say is that this is Martin Luther King Day. And the time is always right to do what is right, according to Mr. King. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Deputy Chief Steve Drew with the Richmond Police Department. I'm here with our Department Counsel, Dave Mitchell, and I would just again support this bill and a permitted event, an event that is pre-planned, that we know where it's going to be and know it's going to happen. We can use this, we can lose this legislation and control those acts. On events that just pop up that we can't control, something that would show up at City Council or take to the streets of Richmond, we know we still have challenges there. But pre-planned, permanent events that we can get the message out that these are our barriers clearly defined. This is good legislation, and we support it with the Richmond Police Department.
Thank you very much.
My name is Robert McAdams. I'm a resident of Albemarle County. I live within the Charlottesville urban ring, and I'm representing the Charlottesville Center for Peace and Justice and the Charlottesville Coalition for Gun Violence Prevention. I have a statement here
Great.
with copies to be distributed. We support this bill. After the July 8th KKK rally, we had asked the Charlottesville City Council, sent them several recommendations, including establishing a weapons-free safety zone around Emancipation Park where all weapons would be prohibited. And there would be a surveillance perimeter that would exclude people from bringing in any of those weapons. We feel that the events on August the 11th.
I hate to do it, but we're going to have to take your written comments. I appreciate your being here.
We see this as an issue of mob rule as illustrated on August 11th and August 12th versus the ability of municipalities to establish public order and safety.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. The rest of the speakers, if you want to step up, state your name, organization, and that you support the bill.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Dr. Wes Bellamy. I am a city councilman in Charlottesville, Virginia. I am in full support of this bill as well as many of our constituents.
Thank you
I really
very
hope you all do the right thing.
Mr. Chairman, Roger Wiley. I'm speaking for the Virginia Municipal League, which does support this bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Dave McCoy, representing the Virginia Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators. We fully support this bill.
Thank you.
Pam Pouchot, Peninsula Indivisible. This is also about intimidation.
Thank you. All right,
We
those who
support
wish
the
to
bill.
speak in opposition to the bill, step up.
I thought there was still time left. Is there not? To support the bill? I'm Kristen Kalaja, constituent of Senator Sturtevant, and I support the bill.
All right. Thank you.
Philip Van Cleve, the VCDL, we oppose the bill. In fact, right now, if we held a rally at the bell tower, which we're going to do at 11 o'clock, it's a permitted event. This whole building would, y'all would have to leave your guns somewhere else. That whole nebulous situation of where the boundaries are, the movies, you could be sitting in a restaurant and a parade goes by unexpectedly, and you're in violation. And you don't need guns to be a weapon. I mean, there were some severe beatings shown on that video, and people need to be able to protect themselves. Things can happen if these emotions get high, but innocent people shouldn't be hurt. So we oppose.
Mr. Chairman, Bob Sadler, South Richmond. Preemption has been in place since 2004, and it has been a lifesaver in preventing citizens from being turned into accidental criminals just for crossing imaginary boundaries. It is a bad idea to start chipping away at it. It should be left in place, expanded if anything.
Thank you.
Aaron Looper with the National Rifle Association. We oppose this bill. By allowing these ordinances, it creates patchwork of laws throughout the state where an otherwise law-abiding citizen could become an unknowing criminal. While unfortunate, those intent on doing harm are rarely stopped by these types of ordinances, even when it doesn't concern firearms, whether it's a vehicle or something else. So, and with any sort of barrier or you know, 1,000 feet outside an area, somebody who maybe lives within that perimeter, or if it's a parade and it's a moving perimeter, could have their right to defend themselves removed just by walking outside their home and having nothing to do with the actual event that's taking place. So again, we ask the committee to oppose these bills. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
I know that there are a lot of differing thoughts on this committee about whether this is the direction we should go or not. For me, I do not think it's the positive direction to go, and I would move that we PBI the bill.
All right. Substitute motion. It's been moved and seconded that the bill be passed by indefinitely. Senator Sasslaw.
I'd move the substitute motion that the bill be reported. Second.
All right. There's a substitute motion that the bill be reported in its present form. The substitute motion is before us. All right. The roll is open on to report. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Ayes 6, noes 9.
All right. The primary motion is to pass the bill by indefinitely.
All right. Mr.
Open
Chairman.
the roll.
Haven't voted on the, we're still not.
No. Open the. This is on to pass the bill by indefinitely.
Ayes 10, noes 5.
All right. The bill is passed by indefinitely. Thank you very much. Do you have another bill?